if you push things down enough, they will eventually pop up, and in quite a loud manner. Because I feel like the human body can't always contain it all. We have to express it in some way. And I think the ways that we express it are the ways that will shift the planet. You can let things affect you, go away into the darkness for a bit, kind of experience that, see where that leads you and what you need to expand on, and then re-emerge.
Hello, and welcome to the Jeffrey Eisen podcast. This podcast is about using spiritual wisdom, insights, principles, and practices to integrate and embody into your life in a practical way. My guests share their story of their spiritual journey, as well as how their spiritual beliefs, insights, and practices have helped them live a better life. Their life stories help others understand and accept life's challenging opportunities for learning, expansion, and growth. And my guest today on the Sheltazar podcast episode is Rachel Hillary from Manchester, UK. Welcome, Rachel. Thank you for joining me on the Sheltazar podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And Rachel and I met rather serendipitously, like I get to meet a lot of people, which is really fun for me. And thank heavens for technology, because I'm starting to meet people all over the world. And that's something very different for me. I was born and raised in a small town of about 15,000 people, and I really thought that was the world. And
wow.
Now I in Toronto, where the greater metropolitan area is about 5 million. And I thought that was pretty big. And now I'm connecting to people all over the world, and that's even bigger. So I think it's really amazing. Rachel and I met over the meditation app Insight Timer. She's got a whole bunch of amazing meditations on there, and I have the messages of Sheltazar on there. And we met, and we had a lot in common. And I invited Rachel to be on the podcast. Rachel, why don't you share with the listeners a little bit about who you are and your spiritual journey?
Well, I am a musician and a Reiki Master practitioner. I read tarot and I create guided meditations. I'm also doing some work with sound healing transmissions at the moment and kind of delving into the healing aspects of sound and music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. I got turned on to sound healing a number of years ago, and I have a few crystal bowls, and I've gone to some crystal bowl healing. And, it is said that spirit in its purest form is sound and light. And I really believe that that's our attraction to music and to sound, is it really stirs our essence. And I'm sure you could speak to that.
I think it's something that we all take part in, even without knowing it, because everyone listens to music in some way, or has an emotional response to it and a connection to it.
How did you first get attracted to sound and music, and were you born with it? Tell us a bit about your life history. I know you really want to tell us a lot about your personal history, because before the show we chatted, and I said, "Oh, Rachel, you'll be able to tell people about your journey, your life," and you said, "Oh no," but I know you're going to do a great job, because it's really important as healers for us to be comfortable sharing our story, because then we're relatable, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the imperfection of people as well is something that needs to become more common in the spiritual community, especially. There is no perfection. Your imperfections are perfect. And that's what I tell other people. So about me, I think I've been singing as long as I could make noises. And my mum tells stories of me wandering around making up songs about seahorses and just singing for pleasure. And that's something that's always been been a part of me. My dad's a musician. My family is all Irish heritage. My dad's from Belfast, so kind of surrounded with music my whole life in lots of different ways. So much so that it feels just a part of me, like a limb. It's that connected to me. And I think that's the same with anyone who's got a passion or a talent, and it just feels natural. So, yeah.
Yeah, it does. It certainly doesn't feel like work when you are using your gift, and so that's great. What about the tarot and the Reiki, and how did spirituality find its way into your singing gift?
Yeah, I don't know if it's kind of, the more I look back, the more I feel like it's always been there, and I kind of rediscovered it. I think we just rediscover things that are there in childhood or when you're a teenager even. It's a very powerful spiritual time, and a lot of us kind of suppress it. And I remember having visions and, feeling like, is this okay? Is this normal to be, seeing colors in the sky and things like that? And then I kind of pushed it down for a while, but if you push things down enough, they will eventually pop up, and in quite a loud manner. So in my mid-20s, it probably all popped back up. And that's when I realized that spirituality was just in everywhere and everything, and I could use it to funnel some of that powerful energy coming through us, because I feel like the human body can't always contain it all. We have to express it in some way, and I think the ways that we express it are the ways that will shift the planet. So that's why I think everyone should be doing it, and that for me is what singing and sound does for me, and for other people, I hope.
Yes, for sure. Definitely, for sure. A couple things that come to mind, and this theme has come up on the podcast before, and that is that young people, children, toddlers, I don't know, I'm an old guy, so I really don't know what to call people as they are growing up, but they have that spiritual connection, and based on what I understand from Sheltazar, more so now than ever before. And yet, if it's not supported, if it's not understood, if it's not nurtured, just like in your case, it can go underground. Thank heavens for you allowed it to surface. I have met many people who, get into their 30s, 40s, and 50s before they allow this spirituality to resurface. So it's really important, and this is a call out to humanity to help nurture these beautiful children that have come in with a strong spiritual connection, because think about where you would be on your spiritual journey if you didn't sort of have to let it go underground for a few years. Think about that, and I think that's really important, and I encourage listeners to watch out for young people who are showing signs of seeing invisible entities or colors in the sky or whatever, and don't poo-poo it, don't put it down. Help them understand that spirituality. I'm a firm believer that often our children are in our lives to be our teacher, and so it's important to allow those children the space to nurture their spiritual gifts.
I think I'm lucky that I have two parents and a sister who all are a bit wacky as well in different ways, and they kind of look at me like I'm crazy sometimes, but for the most part they have pushed my singing and music and creative outlets more than anything else, because I think they see that it's such a powerful expression.
Yeah, it's interesting. Once again, creatives, just like spiritual beliefs that are often snuffed out in young people. And I've had this conversation a number of times with clients recently. I think it's time to change the focus that humanity has to honor more of the creatives than the intellects and the logical thinkers. I think it's time for a shift, and I see more and more creatives that are really frustrated and tired of becoming second-class citizens because creativity is not honored. And you, as a singer singer-songwriter, I'm sure, find that sometimes it's a little bit challenging to share your gift and be honored and get compensated accordingly for your creativity.
Absolutely. And I've had this conversation with so many fellow musicians, especially, and it's kind of this strange feeling of, well, you enjoy doing it. Why don't you just do it? You know, why do you need to be paid to do something you enjoy? And I think, well, I'm going to do it anyway, but if I'm, you know, offering a service to people and they're consuming something that I'm providing and I'm helping to uplift them, any kind of reciprocity, I think, is just, you know, energetic manners.
Well, yes, and it's interesting as you're talking, I'm thinking, well, what's the corollary? Well, society says you have to have a job you hate, you don't really like, in order to get paid. And if you really love it and it's your passion and it comes easy to you, then you really shouldn't be paid.
Yep, I think that's it. And I think also music it's so present that we forget it's there. Like, where would the world be without art or music or creatives? Mm-hmm. It's already a tough place, and I think it would be a lot harder. People are just so used to it being so accessible that if it was taken away, I think it would be appreciated more. I don't want that to happen, obviously.
No. It's interesting you say that, because someone told me once that, you know, that the beginnings of classical music was really the beginnings of meditation, and classical music. Yeah, classical music was an early form of meditation, and if you can listen to some of the classic music, I don't have a great musical ear, but you can see yourself getting into that meditative space.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm, right. Tell me a bit about your songwriting and your singing, and what it does for you and what you hope it does for the audience.
So I think I've taken a break from doing gigs publicly for a few months now, just to have a break and kind of go into my mind and whatever's going on in there for a while. But there's something about when I perform, I always sing with my eyes closed for the most part, mainly because I get very distracted by everything going on, but also because it just feels like there's something singing through me, not to take credit away from myself, because I do feel like it's a part of me, but it's a collaboration. It's always felt like with spirit or something higher. This higher heart energy always seems to come through. And the way you will know it and feel it when a singer, well, as a singer, I feel it when the audience goes really quiet. And you just feel like you have them just with you, and you're all kind of communing together and experiencing something together. And it's the same thing that happens, I suppose, when you listen to a record on your own at home. It's strange. It's like you're romancing each other.
Mm-hmm. Certainly, sound touches a certain part of our essence, a part of who we are. There are four major pathways that we communicate to the invisible world. The clairvoyant sees, the clairsentient feels, and the claircognizant knows, and of course the clairaudient hears. And so, and we all have access to all of those pathways, although some people, have one that is stronger. And so obviously you are hearing something from the invisible world and translating or transcribing that into sounds, words, music. And that is very, very powerful. You mentioned at the beginning of the show that you are doing, channeled sound healings. And in our conversation, I asked you to do one for me, and you've sent it to me, and it's just fabulous. It truly moves my heart, and I will be attaching it to the end of the podcast. So please stay after our conversation and listen to this 4-minute sound channeled healing from Rachel. It's just I keep listening to it over and over again, and it seems to stir up the cells in my body. It brings me back to that remembrance remembering. And so I encourage people to find the sound that touches your essence. I think that's really important, because I think, as Rachel has mentioned, as performers of music and sound, they are channeling their connection to this invisible world. And so music and sound can certainly be a very spiritual experience.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I love songwriting and lyrics, and I would always kind of make them a bit real life, a bit not real life. But there is something also I've discovered about singing without words, even if it's just mantras or kind of made up sounds, that seems to transcend the human experience and allows you to be more connected to a higher essence that is without words or body. So that's something that I'm enjoying doing with these transmissions as well.
Yeah, it's great. It reminds me of Tom Kenyon, who channels the Hathors.
Yeah.
And he does sound healing, and some of his stuff is really very fascinating and really moving. And certainly you have that gift as well. And I encourage listeners, you'll be giving us your contact information at the end of the show. I encourage them to get in touch with you to get your own personalized sound healing, because it certainly is very effective for me, and I love it. How did you get into meditations? Again, we met on Insight Timer, which is a meditation app, and I checked out. You have quite a few meditations and a great following. How did you find Insight Timer, and how did you shift or diversify your gift from singer-songwriting to doing meditations?
I think, if I remember, and it's hard to remember because it was all a bit of a blur at that time, but I was doing more guided meditations myself around 5 or 6 years ago. And that's, I think, when the app was just beginning and it was so tiny. And I just wanted to create the kind of meditations that I would like to listen to, and I couldn't find them anywhere. Kind of tapping into more celestial bodies, or just a bit more woo-woo and kind of fun adventures. Cosmic journey adventures is kind of what I call them. So I just created it for myself. I think that's the way a lot of people kind of fall into doing things, when they're like, well, no one else is doing it, so I guess I'll do it. Well,
it's more genuine and authentic then, isn't it? You know, I would much prefer to get something that someone created for themselves, because there is, there's a purity in that. If you created it to sell it to me, it doesn't quite have the same authentic energy, and that's very much like the messages of Shaltazar. I never imagined that I would be sharing them, because I thought it was them talking to me, and it was just my personal experience. And then I realized, as I'm sure you did with your meditations, that you have to share these things. It's too good to be true, right?
And that's so interesting you say that, because I found that with songs as well, the songs I've written, how you will think they're just personal for you, and then someone else will hear it and it will mean something different or the same for them, but it really touches everyone. And that just always reminds me that everyone's so connected.
Well, right, because at our essence, we are all the same. At our essence, we all have a piece of the source within us. And so if we can connect to that piece of us that is eternal, then we should be able to connect to that same piece in others. It does require a quiet mind, which is why I'm really a big fan of meditation. I think it's really important to quiet that mind. And I'm sure that your music, your singing and songwriting is the same thing. As you mentioned before, when the room becomes silent, you've got them, because the stirring of their busy minds becomes calm. And at that point, Go ahead.
Sorry, I think it's also it's that moment. It doesn't have to be just if you're an artist or a singer. It's that moment that you can find when you're deeply engrossed in a book or you're gardening and you kind of lose track of time and you're just connected to somewhere else. And I think it's in everything. Sometimes people get put off with, oh, I'm not artistic or I'm not creative, but you are in some way. There's something that your heart is calling out for you to take part in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Don't be afraid.
Absolutely. I was, as you were talking, it was like, okay, maybe I should sing in the shower a little bit more.
Yeah, you should. I think everyone should.
I think so. It reminds me of, I think it was Jonathan Goldman, I think it was him, who talked about, he created some humming. He believed that humming could actually heal parts of your body. And he created a CD of humming, and just that the action, the bodily action of air coming up through the vocal cords in a humming fashion is very therapeutic. And so
that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's
I have a song that's called Hum. I've not recorded it or released it, but I was singing it with my friend a few weeks ago, and she's also a singer, and we were just like, wow, humming's really calming, isn't it? It's really relaxing. It does something. So yeah, everyone should be humming and singing whenever they want.
Absolutely, because and there are so many people that I come across that I work with that have issues of the throat chakra because they have been silenced, that they have been quieted, they don't believe that their opinions count. And so by humming, by singing, by opening up, even in the privacy of your own home, your own bedroom, opening up the throat chakra to allow sound to come out will help you not only get in touch with your truth, but have the confidence and courage to speak your truth.
Yeah, definitely. I think everyone has throat chakra issues at the moment. It seems that way anyway. I think it's just a sign of the times and something that once it's opened, everyone could be more connected, because it is really about connection to me, the throat chakra.
Yes, absolutely. Did you ever have any issues of speaking your voice in public? Do you ever remember being nervous about that? Or
I think maybe when I was a teenager, but I've always been very into theatrical things. And if you know me, it's strange because I am quite introverted a lot of the time, but I could always perform. My degree is in theatre. And if anyone knows about astrology, I'm a Taurus sun, which is very throat chakra centered, and a Leo rising. So I like some kind of exposure in the spotlight. And I don't know if that plays a part in it, but I have found, I find that I kind of need to hide away for a few weeks after someone has kind of pushed me down in some way or silenced me. Like it really can affect me. But I think that's okay. I think you can let things affect you, go away into the darkness for a bit, kind of experience that, see where that leads you and what you need to expand on, and then re-emerge once the sun's back out, you know? Yes.
It's definitely a journey, and Shaltazar certainly has taught me that retreating in that darkness, that going within, that becoming reflective, that being in the stillness of darkness is very therapeutic and very important for us to grow and evolve. Once again, before we started recording, you were telling me that when we are recording this on the eve of the winter solstice, and that you have turned out all the lights and you're using candles, and so going into that darkness is important. I have fond memories of the beginning of my journey when my first coach told me to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and have a holy hour where I would journal and meditate and just sit in silence. And 5 o'clock in the morning where I live tends to be dark most of the year, and sitting for that first hour in the darkness and waiting for the light of day, the first light of day to come out, was really an experience that I will always remember, moving from that darkness to light.
It's so powerful. I think that's probably my favorite time of day. And it's also the time of day that I used to just wake up at naturally when I was a teenager and going through kind of all these strange spiritual awakenings. So I do think it's the quiet, powerful nectar of the day. Yogis call it, I believe. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Rachel, you have been on an amazing spiritual journey, and the purpose of the Shelters Are podcast is to help people to integrate spiritual principles and practices so in a practical way so that they can live a better life. What are some of the practices, what are some of the spiritual beliefs that have helped you in your life? Please share them with the listeners so that they too can use this help and this guidance. It's a very difficult time in human history. A lot of people are going through a lot of stuff, and the main purpose of this part of the podcast is to help people get in touch with their spiritual practices and beliefs and use them in a practical way.
Okay, I think the first thing might sound a bit contradictory, but for me it was realizing and remembering that everything is a spiritual practice. Even if it feels kind of out of sorts or you feel a bit off one day, it's still a spiritual practice. You're still a spiritual being. But in terms of more practical things, I think meditation as a daily practice is really, that's what led me further onto this path and onto the journey, because it allowed me a conversation with myself, with my higher self, and to kind of use my inner realms as the most important place and my heart space as the most important place to be, not the external world. That's kind of secondary. But if you can make your inner world the most important sacred place to you, I think that's when you'll truly start to have a spiritual awareness more and more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that certainly requires blocking out that external world, because that external world can be pretty challenging. Yeah. What would you tell the listeners? I get a lot of people that because meditation is being thrown around a lot, and it's really a catch-all. But a lot of people say, "Well, I have difficulty meditating, and it's too hard to meditate." And what would your advice be to the listeners with regard to meditation?
I mean, it's true. I don't think it is for everyone. So maybe maybe not even just meditation, just self-reflection and kind of quiet time alone with yourself allows you to have a conversation with yourself and, get in touch with other realms in a more easy way. It doesn't have to be scary. It's just natural, remembering it's natural. And some people will go on walks, and that's like a meditation for them. I think it's just different for everyone. If it totally feels like it's not working for you, then I don't think you should ever push that with anything,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there are people that say in order to meditate, you have to sit a certain way, or you have to do this, or you have to do that. I would concur with you, and that's what I advise people is the purpose is to quiet the mind. The purpose is to go inward, and you have to do whatever works for you. Many people have told me that, they'll be on the treadmill, they'll go out running, and it allows them to get into the zone. So it's not meditation, it's what we're trying to achieve with meditation, which is, as you talked about, which is going inward, right?
That's exactly it. And I think I've done yoga since I was about 17, and I do a lot of Kundalini yoga now, which is more subtle in a sense, and it just really is kind of accepting everything as perfect as it is, and everyone being so completely different is all a part of the true tapestry. And I think people say that a lot, but people don't really embrace it. We still really, really want to tell people, you should do this, or you should change this. You know, we really need to kind of, I'm doing it myself, it would be better for everyone if we moved away from wanting to change everyone and just kind of accepting. That's something that I'm working on at the moment, is really just accepting differing opinions, differing views, even turmoil within myself and arguments within myself, kind of this acceptance of everything.
It's so interesting you say that, because Shaltazar has taught me that acceptance is love. And the way they explain it is, if you look at the continuum of love, certainly on the upper end is that joy and that bliss and that amazing feeling. But on the lower end of the continuum is acceptance. And so it doesn't feel nearly as good as that bliss and joy and connectedness. But if you can accept, you are loving. And that was really very reassuring to me, because sometimes I can accept things about myself even though I don't like them. And you know, with Shaltazar's wisdom, I've now come to realize that is loving me. And so acceptance is, and it's so interesting that you use that word, because I'm really attached to it. I think we need to work on more acceptance. Yeah.
I think a lot of people say it, but we don't always feel it. But I think it does feel good, doesn't it, when you truly accept it? So.
Yeah, it takes away the resistance, the fight, right. It's a more calming feeling, that acceptance. But let me ask you a question. I agree, it's difficult to work on. You're working on it. I'm working on it. Hopefully, a whole bunch of other people are working on it. Why is that the case? Why do you think acceptance is so difficult?
I think it's a part of this 3D reality. I was thinking about this morning, how I don't think we can ever fully conceive of what we might call God or any divine essence, because our human brains won't allow it, and we can't fully go beyond into that magical space. We can touch it and we can, kind of be there for a while, but we are here to have that duality in a sense. I think we're in the process of watching it shift, and I think it's going to be amazing, however long it takes. But it is strange that it is so difficult. Mm-hmm. But maybe we need to reframe what the word difficult means.
Well, maybe we need to accept difficult.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go. But I think you're onto something. It is a part of the nature of the duality. The duality has such diversity. And I think if you try to accept that which is different than you, it can easily be construed as making you wrong and someone else right. And so I've come to realize that sometimes that lack of acceptance is really a symptom of a deeper cause, and that cause is our sense of self-worth. I think the more comfortable we are with ourselves, the more worthy we feel, the more we can accept that which is different.
I think that's so true. And I read this quote the other day, which was, may you be so confident in yourself that you are humble. And I think you have to be confident to be humble, to have that kind of, it's like a noble, quiet, confidence in yourself, that it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. I've not been there all the time, but anytime I'm in that space, it's great. So that's how I know it's good. Yes.
And it to me, it's what I would imagine would be like to be a master and to become more enlightened, is that quiet humility based on this tremendous inner self-confidence or inner self-worth.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you so much. Before we give you a chance to tell the listeners a bit about what you do and how they can get in touch with you, I wonder if you would be willing to just share a few moments of sound healing right here, right now, impromptu. Something, let me ask, that you bring forth sounds that will help us be more accepting.
Okay.
sorry for putting you on the spot. I know you're, I know Rachel saying, what is he doing? What is he doing? But I know that all you have to do is connect to spirit and just for a few moments, bring out some sounds, okay, that will help each of us connect to that inner acceptance that is the source within.
Will just be some heart singing, it feels like.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Did that ever open my heart?
Yeah, that felt nice, didn't it?
Oh, Rachel, that was amazing. That was amazing. Thank you so much for that. As Rachel mentioned, and she'll tell you in a few moments, she does sound healing. She did one for me. And at the end of this podcast, I will attach that sound healing that she did for me. As I mentioned, it's 4 minutes. It's really fabulous. And you got a bit of a sample of how amazing a sound healer Rachel is. Rachel, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about how they can get in touch with you, some of your offerings with technology. The fact that you're in the UK doesn't really matter because I feel like you're right here beside me in my sanctuary. Okay,
so you can go to my website, which is rachelhillary.co.uk. That's it. And everything's all on there and a bit of more information about me as well. And then also, you can find me on Instagram. My music account, which is more my folk music offerings and songs, is at Rachel Hillary Music. And then if you want to find the more esoteric and mystical things, it's at Red Moon Tarot. And I offer card readings sometimes, and that's more about my meditations also. But if you want all of the meditations for free, you can go to the Insight Timer app and just look up Rachel Hillary, and you should find me there.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rachel. You've been a fabulous guest. I'd love to have you back on the podcast. The time just seemed to fly by. Thank you. You have a beautiful voice. You have a beautiful gift. I highly encourage people to get in touch with Rachel and book your own sound healing, because I know I have listened to the one that you've done for me over and over again, and it moves me. We can maybe even pull out that little heart one that you just did and separate it and put it out there, because I know I will be listening to it over and over again. Thank you for being such an amazing guest. My name is Jeffrey Eisen, the channeler of Shaltazar, spiritual life coach, and thank you so much for listening. Go to my website if you want to check out some of my offerings, jeffreyeisen.com. There will be a new stream, a new segment of this podcast coming shortly called Ask Coach Jeffrey. Sarah Sanguino will be the host of that, and I invite you to send me any questions that you would like me to answer on that show, and as well, if you would like to be a guest on the Shaltazar podcast episodes, please send me a message at jeffrey@jeffreyeisen.com. Big love to everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye and take care.